How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the garage. Today, making a little bit more progress on the Subaru by working on the Cobb fuel system that I picked up a little while ago. This is a fairly in-depth install, but it shouldn't be too bad. I guess most of the difficulty comes from removing pretty much everything off the top of the engine here. Intercooler and the whole intake manifold and everything has to come off. So Cobb does rate this as a 3 wrenches out of 5 wrenches job. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, removing that stuff on the top of the engine there is probably the bulk of the difficulty there, but actually installing the lines and rails and injectors and everything shouldn't be too bad. So the kit that I picked up here comes with a new AEM fuel pump. It comes with the stumble fix, so this is a new fuel pressure regulator, and comes with 1050 cc injectors, which I believe these are just rebranded Injector Dynamics injectors, but they do come with the pigtails already assembled, so you don't have to do anything with that. And then of course Cobb fuel rails and a whole bunch of pre-made hoses that are really nice, labeled, and have dash 6 fittings on the end. And then it also comes with a bag of other fittings here. And what we're going to be replacing with the new dash 6 lines is this whole setup here. So this is the factory fuel system. You've got of course hard lines here, and these are the factory fuel rails, and this is the factory fuel regulator setup. So this is where the stumble problems come from, I believe. What you're basically doing with the stumble fix is going back to previous generation Subarus, where it was a simple regulator, kind of one line in, one line out, not this kind of octopus looking thing here. Overall, it just the Cobb fuel system simplifies a lot of things, and just makes it a nice easy way if you want to add more fittings or add more sensors or anything. It's a lot easier to add those sort of things with the Cobb system than trying to adapt it into the factory hard lines here. And like I was saying, this is a fairly in-depth install, although running the lines isn't too difficult once you remove everything. But this is like a 70-page instruction booklet, which is also available online. You don't have to print it off. And the nice thing about the online version is that any of these pictures you can zoom way in if you're not completely clear on what they're trying to show. But yeah, this does have a really nice instruction manual, and it's got a full layout of the hoses. But yeah, just before you start, just make sure you familiarize yourself with how everything's gonna work and where the lines go. Make sure that you have all the fittings and everything in the kit itself before you start. I guess another thing to note with this kit, even though it is called the complete fuel system kit, it doesn't come with the fuel pressure sensor. That's another additional add-on, and it does not come with an ethanol sensor, so that's another kit. I think you can buy that as a more expensive package, but like I said, the nice thing is that if you don't have E85 in your town or city, you don't have to purchase that additional sensor right away. But if somewhere along the line you do get an E85 pump, you can add that sensor in. Cobb does recommend getting the fuel pressure sensor when you purchase this kit, although I didn't get that right away. I may end up doing that, but it is really easy to add after the fact. But yeah, let's get started with installing this. First things first is we're gonna assemble the fuel rails with the new injectors and get those seated into the TGV deletes. So here's just a quick look of everything that you'll need to assemble the fuel rails. One important thing to note is that these spacers do come in two sizes, a long version and a short version. It's nice that they're labeled with an L and an S. If you are using the 1050 injectors that come with the kit, then you'll be using the long spacers, as well as ID 1000, ID 1300, ID 1700. Those are long spacers. And if you're using South Bay 1000s, STI Blues, FIC 1000s, or ID 2000s, then you'll be using the short ones. But since we're just using the 1050s included with the kit, we'll be using the long spacers. Alright, so assembling our fuel rails is fairly simple. We'll take one socket cap screw, a spacer, and an O-ring and insert it into these 4 locations. And what we'll do here is take a socket cap screw and a spacer and install an O-ring. Being careful not to tear it or pinch it. And we'll do that for the rest of them.
Perfect, perfect.
Next, we'll install the injectors into the rails, lubricating the O-rings just a little bit with some silicone spray. Just like that, and again, we'll do these for the rest of them. And next we'll install the assembled pigtails. And it's only go on one way, so So over onto the car here, we'll just remove the tape that I've got here on my new TGV Delete. This is from Torque Solutions, by the way. And taking the fuel rail, this only really goes on one way, so you can't really screw it up. We'll line it up with the holes for the injectors. Once those are lined up, we'll gently press to seat them, and we'll tighten up the socket cap screws using a number 6 Allen wrench. then we'll move on to the passenger side. Now that we've got the fuel rails and injectors installed, we'll move on to routing the lines. It's important to note in the instructions here that it says each line has a 3-inch bend radius. So these are fairly stiff, and you definitely don't want to kink these and bend them too far past that 3-inch bend radius, or you will ruin this hose. And you also want to assemble these AN fittings with WD-40, such as this silicone spray. And this is just the same diagram that I drew out on my board, just to familiarize myself with how this is going to be routed. So yeah, this is pretty simple, although it doesn't show you how you get this around the turbo and whatnot, but I'll show you that next. So first off, we'll start by taking line 2, which is labeled here, and taking this 90-degree fitting and mounting it to the firewall side of the fuel rail and routing it under the turbo inlet in this direction. Next up, we'll take line 1 and we'll mount this 180-degree fitting to the bumper side of this fuel rail here and route it in the same direction as line 2. Well, it turns out I might have got a bad fitting directly from Cobb. So I went to screw this on and the threads pulled right off the end of this immediately. So that's really unfortunate, but hopefully I can go grab another one of these from somewhere else, but let's see here if you can see that. Yeah, just buggered the threads as soon as I went to put this on, so that's unfortunate, but yeah, we'll try to go find one of these and then I'll be right back to install the rest of this. Okay, so finally, after driving around town for 2 hours, I found the replacement to this part. These ones just happen to be made by Russell Performance, and this is the part number here. And they are slightly different, like the outside kind of flats here is -10 instead of -8. And it's funny because the internal diameter looks to be smaller than this if you put them side by side, but I measured it with a caliper and they're both the same size, so yeah, this should work. So I've just thrown a little bit of that silicone spray on here just to lube up the threads and lube up this O-ring just a little bit. We'll just snug this down. So hopefully get this line to thread on here. So we'll just lube those threads up again and give this another shot here. Okay, so that did end up going on. It did fight me a little bit, so yeah, I'm not entirely sure what that is because I did thread this adapter into this fitting before putting it into the rail and it fit just fine, so yeah, I'm not entirely sure what that's all about, but this is essentially how the routing is supposed to look. So it looks like we might have a potential issue here just with where the opening here is for the filter. It doesn't seem like there's going to be enough room to get the silicone MAF tube onto here without I don't know, raising this up somehow. But I guess we will get to that when we get to that point. But for now, we'll just move on to the driver side lines. We'll start with line 3 on the front of the fuel rail here, and we'll snake it down and around like so. Take line 4 with our 180 degree fitting and snake it in this way to the firewall side of the fuel rail, and then follow the routing of line 3, which looks to be fairly tight, so hopefully this goes well. right, and with that on here, kind of move it out of the way and try to position this in such a way that you don't bend it too much. All right, shoot. So it looks like that's not gonna work, so we'll have to feed in the other end first and kind of wrap it around. Undo this blue plug here just to give myself a little bit more room. And just for now, I've only done these all up hand tight. And I'll go back and snug them up with my 6AN wrench, but this looks to be it, so you guys over here. So you essentially want all of your lines kind of converging right here, because we'll install some ANY fittings and run 2 of these to your feed and then 2 of these to your return. Next up here, we'll locate line 2 and line 4 and join them with a supplied Y fitting. Line 2. And make sure again to lubricate these threads before attaching them to the lines. Double check that's the right one. Line 4. All right, there we go. And finally, to complete the installation of our feed line, we'll take our hose number 5 and connect it to this Y here. And find a suitable routing location for this hose to the feed line. Now the nice thing about this one is that it is much more flexible, so we have a little bit more options on how to do this. But I think doing something like this will work out well. With line 5 now routed to the firewall, we'll need to attach this AN adapter to the hard line. I've got this blocked off here, just a piece of rubber capping. So the way that you want to attach this fitting is just squeeze this and the plastic piece comes out. Then slide this open end over top of the hard line. Hopefully you can see that. Well, it took a lot of force, and I got this on. It doesn't actually just slide on like the internet will make you believe, but it does go on. What I had to do was generously lube the 2 O-rings that are in here. And then once that was done, also put lube onto the hard line here and just lined it up and just really pressed it on here. And it's on here now, so hopefully it didn't mess up the O-rings or anything and it doesn't leak. But now that we've got that all buttoned up, we can go ahead and finally secure our last our feed lines to the feed source here. Yeah, so we've got our line 5, as you can see, running along here to this Cobb Y, and I might just add a couple zip ties or something here just to kind of make this a little more solid, but yeah, that should be wrapped up for the feed side. So next we can jump to the return side, which will include installing the GR stumble fix. Okay, so moving on to the fuel pressure regulator portion of the fuel system, I guess also known as the GR stumble fix. This is essentially what you get in the box. So I think it's a little bit different than the kit that you would get if you just got the stumble fix and not the fuel rail kit. But yeah, this is basically it. As you can see, this is a stock Subaru part, and it's just a pressure regulator from an older model Subaru. So I'll just get this out of the package and then have a better look at it. And this hose here is, this one comes from the fuel rail kit. So I guess if you bought this on your own or without the fuel rail, you'd get this line and this. And yeah, that'd be pretty much it. But essentially what this does is take this whole big contraption here and simplifies it into this here, with just one line for pressure reference, which does get changed from the manifold up to where the blow-off valve or recirc valve goes, and that's what the silicone hoses are for, and also this vacuum tee in the hardware package. So I'll get these little guys off and put these hoses on, and we'll get over to the car. Alright, so hopefully I can explain what you're going to need to do with the vacuum reference line. So in stock form, with this regulator setup, you've got this small vacuum hose that goes down to this vacuum nipple located here on the intake manifold. So with the Cobb kit, what you're going to do is remove that line and take this small rubber cap that's included and place it over here, just like that. Yeah, you might want to think of something a little more permanent, because Cobb does say, like, obviously this is rubber and rubber will deteriorate, so over time you may get a leak here if this rubber rots out. But that basically takes care of that. So to run the new line from the new regulator, see if your recirc valve was set up, you'd take the provided silicone hose here, or use the factory hose, whatever. This would be coming off here like so. You'd cut this and insert a T like that, and then take this side just like that and run it out to the vacuum T or vacuum nipple on the new regulator. So that's basically how you're gonna want to run that. So over at the car, we'll take this hose here, which has, I guess, a GM style clip, and we'll find our return line down here. And all you need to do is just slide this guy on past the little notch and then push the clip down. Hopefully you can see that there. Next up, we'll take our regulator, the spacer, the bolt, and the nut, and we will install it right into here where the old pressure regulator assembly sat. And you basically want this oriented as such. So this is the firewall, and then this is the bumper side. So we'll take the bolt, take our spacer, place it down here. Now we'll just move some of these lines out of the way. Make sure to slide our hose clamp over this hose here. And we'll place that onto the regulator just like that. Yep. And we'll tighten this clamp down. Now that we've got our regulator mounted to the original regulator's bracket, we can go ahead and connect up lines 1 and 3 with another Y fitting. Now with the Y installed, we need to build a little stack of fittings here. So this is if you're going to add a fuel pressure sensor or the ethanol sensor. This is where you'd split off before going into the regulator. But since we're not doing that, we'll go ahead and add this female to female fitting on the end of here. Just like that. And I'm not entirely sure what this guy's called, but we'll then add this guy onto the end here. Now with that in place, we can go ahead and take this line, which is called the unmarked line, just because it has no number on it, and install it just like that. Push the clip down to lock it in. And again, this one is flexible, so we should be able to route it somewhere under here. hopefully this stuff all clears the intercooler. But yeah, that's essentially how you route that stuff. I'll go ahead and quickly tighten that hose clamp there, and I'll go around and tighten the rest of the fitting. Alright guys, well that pretty much wraps it up for me today on the fuel line install. It wasn't the most in-depth, I'd say, just because most of the stuff that is involved, like removing the intake manifold and whatnot, was already done, but hopefully it does give you sort of a brief idea on what's involved in routing these lines and kind of how things go together. I will be putting in the fuel pump at a later date, so that's still left to do, but yeah, pretty much it's done. Just gotta maybe do a leak test, which I'm kind of nervous about because I think I might have buggered up this fitting right here, this AN to hardline fitting, but luckily it's a cheap part. You can get it from Vibrant. I think it's about like 10 bucks, so shouldn't be too bad if that leaks, but yeah, once again, thank you for watching.